Welcome to Growing Up Boomer. I'm your host, Padre, and this podcast is dedicated to the life and times of the baby boomer generation. The show is loosely scripted, and sometimes we'll go down rabbit holes, and where it leads us to, one will never know. This podcast can be informative, funny, and sometimes irreverent, but most of all, we hope you find it entertaining. Hey, Professor, how's it going, my man?
Really good, Padre. How about you?
Oh, man, I cannot complain. But you know what? Talked about my wife's birthday had just had passed.
Okay.
And I've told you this before. The true definition of a diplomat is that a man will always remember his wife's birthday, but never remember her age.
Right.
Am I right?
That's definitely diplomatic. Absolutely. Yeah, unless you get stuck on a 9.
Yeah, they're 21.
Well, even 29 would be okay.
I told you what happened.
At our age, 29.
I told you what happened to me when I had my 45th wedding anniversary. I was still working, and Kathy posted a picture of me and her when we were dating on my Camaro, my 1970 Rally Sport Camaro. Okay, we're sitting on the fender. Got a picture going, and so everybody saw it on Facebook, and they go, "Man, Kathy still looks fantastic." And they turned to me and go, "Joe, what happened to you?"
Yeah. Crazy. Speaking of anniversaries, today is Jackie's and mine, our 46th anniversary today.
Oh, how wonderful.
So there you go. And you guys are at 48, 9, I forget.
No, this year will be 50.
Oh, this is coming up?
Yes, sir.
Ooh-wee. Wow. Your kids are going to do something special for you, right?
Oh, I don't want anything special. I want to do something special with Kathy.
Okay. Well, I want my kids to, our 50th, I want to do something special with Jackie too, but I want my kids to pay for it.
Oh, I like that. That's even better.
I want them to send us on a really nice trip.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Ah, thank you. I'll start planting the seed.
Just plant that seed, Bubba.
Little cultivation's going to be needed here, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
Okay, well, you know what, Professor? We talked about racism in the Hollywood movies, or how they dealt with racism, you know, when they started becoming more aware.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said before, is that art imitates life, or life imitates art.
Right.
I think when it came to the baby boomers, I really believe that art was imitating life.
Okay.
You know, because when these movies really started coming out, baby boomers were already in the streets, a lot of them. Not only were they in the streets for equality and civil rights, but also against the war.
Right. Well, you're talking movies in the 60s.
Correct.
Mid-60s.
That's when it really started. If you really looked at it, that's when all the movies started coming out about racism, even though they had a sprinkling of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but they really brought it to the forefront in the 60s.
You know, interesting, because the movies that I think I want to talk about today were actually early 50s. Mm-hmm. Well, 1950, and then 57 and 58.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's certainly for the, that's just into the boomer years.
Right.
So a lot of those kids are young, but I was so impressed. First of all, I decided that I wanted to talk more about the Sidney Poitier movies, because we had talked about, do something that impressed you. Mm-hmm. And his acting, when I first saw him, I don't know why I was mesmerized. Mm-hmm. Okay. I just thought he was really good. He just, the way he was able to portray the characters and do it and pull it off, I just thought it was really good. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to, as we get into the movies, I'll be talking about, a couple of them, if not more than that.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
But he got his start in 1950. Yes. That's with his debut.
Yeah.
So, that's why these are early movies. In the 60s, even early 70s, movies with depicting racism. You're right. There's definitely differences between them.
Right. Oh, yeah. Ones that are but before we go on, hey, I want to let you know that we got our first downloads from Ukraine.
Cool.
The first time I ever heard about Ukraine was in the 60s.
Okay.
And it was because of the Beatles.
Okay. What's the connection there?
Back in the USSR.
Oh, well, of course. Back in the USSR.
And remember the chorus.
Yeah.
The Ukraine girls really knock me out. They leave the West behind. Do, do, do. And I'm going like, and you know what? It's funny. is they say that Ukraine women are the most beautiful women in
I
all
have
of
heard
Europe.
that. I have heard that.
Yeah, and I'm going like, it must be true. The Beatles said so.
And they speak the truth.
They speak the truth.
The
If
truth.
it's good enough for the
Absolutely.
Beatles, it's good enough for me.
There you go. I get it. Silly.
Oh, but yeah, so who's ever listening in Ukraine, you keep it up. We appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks, Ukraine.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Let's get to your movie, my man.
Well, okay. So this is Sidney Poitier's debut movie,
Mm-hmm,
and it's called No Way Out,
mm-hmm,
and it was
mm-hmm,
1950. And it's Sidney Poitier in his debut alongside Richard Widmark, Linda Darnell, and Stephen McNally. And really, it centers on Poitier
mm-hmm,
being a young doctor just out of residence,
mm-hmm,
working kind of a county hospital with a really, really supportive mentor doctor.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And so what happens is he ends up going into the working in the prison hospital,
mm-hmm,
and two brothers, the Biddlers, come in,
mm-hmm,
and they were both in there. They were shot. Each of them was shot. Okay, because during a robbery.
mm-hmm,
And so
mm-hmm,
he takes a look at one of them, and he's disoriented, and he's really thinking, I think there might be a brain tumor or something, a lot of pressure going on there.
mm-hmm,
So he goes and does a spinal tap, and in the process of spinal tap, he dies. Now, the other brother's in the room and watch this and swears that Poitier killed him. And so, and I have to tell you, this particular movie has probably got some of the nastiest racism that I think I've seen in movies. Vicious stuff. And I believe in all the films that I've seen Poitier, I'm not saying that the others weren't difficult roles, but this one to me might have been his most difficult. The debut aside, I mean, he was spit on twice, okay?
mm-hmm,
Called epithets. You can't it was really, really, it was very uncomfortable,
mm-hmm,
okay, for
mm-hmm,
me to watch, okay, to see that. So anyway, so the brother Ray is thinking that, you killed him. And Portier, who's Luther, wants to do an autopsy to prove, okay, that he thought it was a brain tumor, to prove it. Well, Ray said, no way. Okay, not going to happen. You're not cutting up my brother, and called him all sorts of things, and get your black hands off me, and all this other stuff. And he's one of the two people that spit in his face. And so he decides to go to the relatives, to find relatives. And he founds the brothers who died, his ex-wife. And she kind of seems to go along with it, but then ends up talking in prison with Ray, and he talks her out of it. So now Portier is getting so much racism and stuff against him that the black community decide to rise up, and they were going to go out and take on, the right folk, if you will.
right.
And so he got a hold of that, and he tried to stop it. People got hurt, and now he's trying to take care of people that got hurt in that riot. And so it goes back and forth, and the one woman, get your black hands off my brother, like that. It was really, really, it was very uncomfortable. Anyway, so it turns out, though, that he confessed that he killed the brother, and that forced an autopsy, because they weren't going to do an autopsy. So since it forced the autopsy, he did it on purpose, and ultimately the autopsy found it was a brain tumor. And and it turns out that Edie, who was the ex-wife, who was racist, by the end of it all, she just turned around and felt comfortable with that. And it turns out then that he ends up in a room with Ray, and Ray's got a gun, and Ray is going to shoot him. And Edie turns out the lights, and there's a gunshot. And Portier gets shot in the shoulder, but he was able to wrestle the gun from Ray. And Ray's leg is really bad. I mean, it's mangled when he got shot. Really, really, really bad, mangled. So basically the way it ends is he grabs Ray's gun after he collapses in pain. And then Luther, Portier, just basically states that he can't let Ray simply die because of his racism. And he convinces Edie to help save Ray's life. And as the sirens are coming in the distance, Luther tells the historical Ray, "Don't cry, white boy. You're going to live." And that's how the movie
Oh,
ends.
man.
So yeah, it was interesting. But I got to tell you, I mean, I've seen stuff in movies before, but it was really vicious stuff.
Yeah. When did you see that movie?
Last week.
Now,
Yep.
did you re-see that movie? In other words, you've
Nope.
seen it before, but you were looking through it through a different lens.
No, I decided after we were talking, and I was thinking about, okay, which movies I can take movies that I've seen before, or I really like Portier.
Mm-hmm.
Let me look at some of the movies I haven't seen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I did. I took a look at some of the movies that I haven't seen,
Mm-hmm.
and they were his earlier movies.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it ended up.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
what I saw are all fresh.
And you were looking at it through the guise of not entertainment, but just looking at it through the guise of, hey, how was that movie made? Did it really question racism, which it did, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it shined the light on how
Mm-hmm.
dark racism was, in those days. Was that in Alabama? Well, it doesn't really say, but it's down south, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, you say
And,
obviously, but
yeah,
I was going to say, yeah, racism knows no bounds.
it knows no bounds, but it was probably more prevalent in the South.
Yeah, much
Back in
more
those days,
prevalent.
anyway. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So it was a good movie,
Mm-hmm.
and I've got to say he did a great job. In a debut to be able to basically have all the stuff thrown at him
Mm-hmm.
and maintain the resolve and the calm demeanor,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and not react in front of that.
Mm-hmm.
After he left the room, he might have got excited and reacted, but not. I mean, it was really he did a really good job.
Right.
For a debut. It was great.
Wow. Yeah. For me, I want to go over one that it was one of my brother's favorites, which was Planet of the Apes.
Okay.
Done in 1968.
Okay.
Now, the reason why I chose Planet of the Apes, it's based upon a book by a French novelist, but the person that wrote the screenplay was Rod Serling from The Twilight Zone.
Yep, Mr. Twilight Zone.
Yes, and he was very, very active in the civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
And when he wrote the screenplay for Planet of the Apes, in which they took a lot of what he had said, is that he wanted to show the human condition of the African American in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the whole idea, if you really start analyzing how Planet of the Apes was, of course, the whole basis is that they're going out to find a planet out in the middle of nowhere next to a planet revolving around Betelgeuse, which is, I know it, which is actual star in the Orion. Yeah.
It really is.
But,
it's an actual star. Yep.
I know it. Every time I hear Beetlejuice, all I can think of is Michael Keaton in that role.
Yep.
or when you look at it, it's Betelgeuse.
Yeah, Betelgeuse.
Well, what ends up happening is, it ends up not going to the planet, but it actually comes back to Earth in the future, in which case there has been an atomic Armageddon, and the apes have evolved to be the superior race, and the humans have evolved to just mere animals or pets, basically was what it is. But
they're subservient.
Right? No, they're not even. They're
not even to that level.
They're not even now in the remake by Tim Burton. They're subservience. You are correct.
Yeah.
And you know what? Yeah. You know what I learned from that movie, the second one with Mark Wahlberg.
What?
He can't land a spaceship to save his life. Okay, the chimpanzee comes in, boom, he lands it. He gets in it, and he ends up crashing again. Yeah, this guy can't he can't fly a ship to save his life.
I guess it is rocket science.
Yeah. But the whole idea is, if you really look, because Sterling, he fought in World War II. He wanted to go to Europe, but ended up being in the Pacific campaign. Mm-hmm. So once he got back, because he had faced discrimination because he was Jewish, when he saw this novel, he was going to write screenplay for it. So if you really look at how everything is placed, for instance, the orangutans are basically the political or the religious leaders. Mm-hmm. They wear the chest plate like the high priest in the Jewish temple. Mm-hmm. They basically rule the roost. Mm-hmm. They talk about the scrolls coming down from the lawgiver, which is kind of like Moses. And so what Sterling wanted to do was mix the Old Testament and the Declaration of Independence kind of together. So in other words, not only is a religious leader, but they also are running the political part of this. And of course, you've got the guerrillas, in which case they're the soldiers, they're the law keepers, and basically the laborers. And then you've got the chimpanzees. So this is kind of like a caste system. In other words, if you're born a chimpanzee, this is all you're going to do. If you're born a gorilla, forget it. You're just going to be a laborer, nothing else. Where the chimpanzees were the intellectuals, the pacifists, but they had no power because of quotas. And that's what Sterling wanted to show, was that we are in a system that does not allow people to their full potential because of who they are. And humans basically were just animals. What the chimpanzees were trying to do was to show that you need to have mercy no matter how low a life form there is. You must always have compassion. And that's what the whole idea was the Charlton Heston character. And they were using him to show that, you know what, these people have intelligence as well. I mean, they're just not, they're just not animals, but also you need to treat them with compassion as well. So that was his whole thing on the Planet of the Apes, is that the structure of America at that time, you could only go so high because of the color of your skin. When you really analyze it, you start thinking, wow.
Well, I thought you were trying to tell me that the orangutans were the chosen apes.
Not so much the chosen ones, but the ones in charge. And I'm not giving up power. No one else can be a lawgiver or a politician unless you're an orangutan.
Right. Okay.
But it's so funny. I don't care who's in power. They don't want to give it up.
No.
Intellectuals, conservative, it don't matter. When they're in power, they're not giving it up.
That's true. Power corrupts, and it corrupts absolutely.
And absolute power absolutely corrupts. And this is what he was trying to show here on this one when he wrote the screenplay.
Right. I remember. I mean, I remember it to some degree, but I didn't look at it from, how do I say this? I was watching that movie more for entertainment than I was for what, value it had from a cultural or educational perspective.
Sure.
Although I think I intuitively, you could see that obviously the humans were way down below. So obviously it was there. But I think, that was the first Planet of the Apes.
Yes.
That was, we didn't see anything like that really before.
No.
Not like that. So just on itself, the cinematography and all the other kind of stuff.
Correct.
It was enough other stuff to keep you occupied without thinking deeply about it.
Well, after that, they went downhill pretty fast.
Oh, I understand. Okay. Yeah. Lots of times sequels don't make it or they aren't the same. There are some exceptions, but
I'm telling you. Many. Okay. Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, yeah. Well, wait a second. I said sequels generally don't do as good as the original, but there are exceptions. And those are some right there.
For me, John Wick 2.
Okay, well, I'd have to go see it.
I know. Okay. I know. I see all of those movies, What do they call me?
Well, you see every movie.
Oh, as much as I can. That's the only time I can disconnect from life itself and just relax. Movies and reading, that's it.
Yeah. I get it.
If I'm doing something, I got to be doing something. What am I got to do? Do you have another movie you want to talk about?
Well, actually, I had a couple, but I think maybe, gosh, I don't know which one.
Pick one.
Mark of the Hawk or the Defiant ones. I think I'll do the Defiant ones.
Oh,
and so have you seen it?
Oh, yeah. Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier.
Sidney Poitier, Tony Curtis, and Theodore Bickel and Lon Chaney are in it also. So that was filmed in 1958, and basically it's in the late 50s in southern U.S. And there's a truckload of prisoners that ends up going off the road, and these two, Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier, are chained together. And of course the warden just kind of did it for fun. Well, anyway, they escape. Everyone else is either captured or dead. And they escape. And they're just on the run, all tied to each other, and they were come to fisticuffs a couple of times about ready, and so on and so forth. I mean, there was a lot of, racial, it wasn't undertones, it was overtones. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. As far as that's
Oh
concerned.
yeah.
And but they had to try to help each other escape. And
Mhm.
so, they were hiking like forever, running. And of course, they had bloodhounds after him, the sheriff and a posse, and, a whole search party going to him. And they go through a lot of very difficult terrain and weather. They actually found a turpentine camp, and they
Mhm.
attempted to break into a general store, and they wanted to find tools to be able to break the chain and everything else. But they're captured by the inhabitants, who form a lynch mob,
Mhm.
and they're only saved by the interference of who the character is, Big Sam, big dude, okay, like Lon Chaney, and he's appalled at the neighbor's bloodthirst. But Sam persuades all the onlookers to lock them up.
Mhm.
And so they locked him up, and then at night he secretly released them because he was a former chain gang prisoner himself. So there
Yeah,
was
that's
an
right.
affinity there. Well, they end up running. They run into a little boy named Billy,
Mhm.
and they make him take him back to his house. And his mother's there, who was abandoned by Billy's father, who abandoned the family. And they're able to break their chains. And they get to spend the night there. And the woman, the mother, she's very lonely, and she's attracted to Joker. Now, Joker is Tony Curtis, okay, and wants to run off with him. And what she does, she advises Cullen, which is Sidney Poitier, to go through the swamp to reach the railroad tracks, because railroad tracks, they could hop the train and get out of there.
Mhm.
So he does that. He takes off and starts going. And what she wanted to do was she had a car, was going to drive off with the Joker in her car. But after Cullen leaves, the woman reveals she lied. And basically, she sent Cullen into the dangerous swamp to die, to eliminate any chance he'd be captured, and reveal where the Joker was gone. And so she just didn't care. Okay.
Mhm.
She was kind of blown away when he first showed up. Here comes, Joker, and here comes this black guy. So she had the racism in her also. And so while she sounded as if she was trying to help him go free, she
Mhm.
was really sending him to his death. Well, Joker hears this, and he can't do it. So he leaves. But as he leaves, the son picks up a gun and shoots him. So now, he's shot and he's running, and he's wounded, though. He finally catches up to Cullen and warns him about the swamp. And the posse, there's a humane sheriff, gets close. But the convicts, they hear a train whistle, and then they start running towards it. And Cullen is catching up the train and jumps aboard, and Joker's trying to run along, and he grasps Cullen's hand,
Yeah.
and he's trying to pull him up, and they both tumble to the
Yeah.
ground. Okay, and they're just too exhausted. And finally, the sheriff finds Cullen singing defiantly as Joker dies in his arms. And that's the end of the movie.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, there's racism in it, but it wasn't the vile stuff like the first one I talked
Mhm.
about,
Mhm.
like No Way Home.
Yeah.
But it was racism, and but it was good to see. Tony Curtis. They're all young.
Yeah.
Okay, they're
Well,
young.
we were all young at one time.
Are you sure?
That's why I always said if I ever wanted to be an actor, I would want to be an actor at my age right now.
Yeah,
I wanted to make it right now because I don't want people to look at my old movies and say, man, what happened to this guy?
Yeah, funny you talk about old. Without getting to backstory, Jackie's niece
Mhm.
sent her some pictures, and in it were pictures of her holding Justin when he was 6 months old, and me holding Justin 6 months old. And I'm on, and while we're doing this, we're on Zoom with my 7-year-old granddaughter who lives near you.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
and she says, "Is that you, Grandpa? Is that you, Grandma?" So I get your point. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so funny when you walking down the street and you see people about your age, you always look at them and say, man, they look old. And little do you realize they're saying the same thing about you.
Of course. The older I get,
Uh-huh.
and I'm sure you're going through this, I find myself in situations where I'm like the oldest person there. And it's
Yeah.
kind of like,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I like this. Sometimes it's like, hey, I'm the oldest, but sometimes kind of like, oh, man. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Hey, well, you know
So
what?
anyway,
Consider the alternative. I'd
I
rather
know
be the
considering
oldest
the
one there.
alternative, it's okay. I
Yeah.
mean, I plan on living to 100, so hopefully I'll have half a brain while I'm there.
Get those
So
triple, you want that triple digits, right?
I want a triple digit. Are you okay? And if I live to be 100, my kids better do something nice.
I already told my kids I just want to be in the rest home of the stars, heavily medicated. Okay.
Yeah, okay, that sounds not bad either. Okay, so
Oh,
yeah, yeah, but I have
yeah.
another movie if you think we have time.
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay, all right. Well, the other one is, and again, this is Sidney Poitier,
Hmm.
and this might be his second movie. It's The Mark of the Hawk. Have
Hmm.
you ever seen it?
I have that one. I have not.
Finally,
Hmm.
finally, a movie you haven't seen. My goodness. Um, anyway, it's so Sidney Poitier and Eartha Kitt,
Hmm.
and so he's known as Obama, and which he goes back to Africa, and he actually he's elected to the legislative body.
Hmm.
So he's like the first, and so you can imagine this is like I think it's like South Africa, or that's what it seems to be. I don't know for sure, but his younger brother, he is a rebel.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And so, the opening scene almost is the brother is sneaking up to the house where his big brother, Obama, and his wife are.
Hmm.
They had just arrived back.
Hmm.
And what they do is they trap and they kill a hawk and they hang it like outside their house.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's the mark of the hawk. And he comes out and he sees it and he doesn't get too excited about it. They end up going to the governor's house. And anyway, so it follows them all the domestic tensions that are going back and forth between the natives. They want the return of their ancestral lands,
Hmm.
which are now farmed by European settlers, the British. And so Britain and the local white administration are determined not to release their stranglehold. And they, rather than adopting violence, Obama seeks racial equality through peaceful means. Okay,
Hmm.
and it's his motives are frequently questioned by his own people, but he's got a very insightful spouse and a sympathetic missionary known as Bruce Craig. This whole newcomer to African nationalism, they fight to make a difference
Hmm.
before the situation deteriorates further. And ultimately, there's a lot of violence in it. The natives, burn houses. They do all of that, but ultimately, he's accepted. Okay, into the legislative body. He's kind of proven himself to some degree. So that's the quick gist of it.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it was good. It was a good movie. It was of the three of them that I watched. That was not the one that wasn't my favorite.
Hmm.
Okay, the other two, No Way Out and the Defiant Ones, those are great.
The Defiant ones are excellent.
It was really good.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I just really, really like that one because you're right. Because one thing that I thought it was that Tony Curtis couldn't stand Sidney Poitier because he was black.
absolutely,
Oh, that's why they came to fisticuffs all the time,
absolutely. Yeah,
and then to be chained, and then at the very end, he cares for Sidney Poitier,
yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
and
Yep, he wants
I think the whole point of the story is once you get to know the people,
exactly.
that you find out, hey, well, you know what? they bleed red just like you do. There's no difference once you get past the skin.
And prejudices. If you let your prejudice get in the way, you're
Yeah,
never going to know anybody.
yeah,
Okay, or your
yeah.
beliefs get in the way, and if you just let your ego get out of the way, and
Mhm.
actually get to know somebody,
Right.
you might like them.
Yeah, yeah. And
I mean, you might not. But okay,
you might not, but the killer
it's
is
possible.
too. Is you remember we were baby boomers, and remember what was our mantra was, well, if we just intermarry, that'll be the end of racism.
Right,
I
right.
remember that, like, and
Yeah.
yeah, and that happened, and you know what? It didn't end it, did it?
No, no. I think it helped, but it certainly didn't end it.
No, because the gist of it, how wrong we were,
Right,
as
right.
baby
Yeah,
boomers, we're do. Oh yeah, if we just intermarry, yeah, that'll be the end of racism because we're all mixed up.
yeah.
We were wrong,
Well,
but it is what it is, and it's what you've always said is that hey, get to know the person. That's all.
sure.
Just know the
Yeah,
person. Look at them
yeah.
as a person. Because
Right.
that's it. I
Then
mean,
decide. Then
yeah,
decide if
then
you like him or
decide.
not.
Either he's got good character or he doesn't.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
The color of
Yeah.
somebody's skin, just pigment. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all it is.
you know,
That's all it is.
everybody wants the same thing for their kids. Everyone
Right.
wants their kids to succeed. Everyone wants what's best for their family. That's it.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
You know what? Professor, we're running a little long here. What do you say we bring this
I'm
one
not
to an end,
surprised.
buddy?
We went a long ways. Okay. Good stuff.
Well, we had fun, though.
Absolutely.
All right, man. You have a great day, okay?
You too. Talk soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We'd like to thank you for listening and remind you if you happen to have any baby boomer topics you'd like us to cover, just email us at growingupboomer@gmail.com. And until next time, may God bless.